Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Writer's Block with Miriam. Now, I think you know when you've made it as a poet, when they start including you in contemporary anthologies. And Michael J. Whelan, who I have with me today, is one of those poets. He is a contemporary Irish poet and a serving Irish soldier. And he has written books, poetry collections, articles, all different types. And I'm delighted to have him here today. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on board, Miriam. It's great to be here. Thank you.
No worries at all. Michael, when did it all start for you? When did this attraction to writing and poetry begin?
Well, how do you answer that question? So when I was a child, I suppose I was into art and drawing and all that kind of stuff. But the writing, I suppose, started when I was doing a degree in history and Maynooth way back in the early part of this century. And
another century.
Yeah. So I got into, you'd have to write essays, and then I started writing articles and publishing them in the military magazine, the Kosovo, which would be the Defence Force magazine. And then the poetry came. It's funny, today is Mother's Day, so the poetry came just after my mother's funeral.
Oh,
2008, yeah. So it was a very emotional time, as you can imagine, and I was trying to release this emotion somehow.
Yeah, the awakening came through her.
I started writing down these things I was feeling, and then I started writing really, really, really bad poems. But it was a release, and while that was happening, I was remembering conversations I'd had with her about being overseas peacekeeping and in these places, and she'd say to me, you should write this stuff down, son, it's important. But you wouldn't want to be telling your mother all of this stuff that you experienced.
I know.
Or any of you. Now I managed to put this, just a process I went through, and I put it into poetry, and then people got interested in it, and I started getting published. So that's the long-winded answer, sorry.
No, that's great. And like from that point on, were there other people who noticed what you were doing and encouraged you, in the year or so that followed her funeral? Or was it your own initiative really to just go ahead and start writing and trying to maybe publish somewhere? Because a lot of people wouldn't know where to begin.
Well, what happened was it was about a year after she died. You were talking before the interview about the sketches I was doing,
yes,
the silhouettes. So I was putting them with these kind of really bad poems, and I put them into a book. Then people start coming on board. So you had a lunch that night, and then I met I'd known the heritage officer for South Dublin, and some of the old veterans from the army that I had friends with at the time encouraged me, and I joined some writers groups, I suppose, and I met great poets who encouraged me that way. So
now when
long process.
Yeah, I mean I love the work. I hope you don't mind me stealing these from your website to put really. This is Cuchulainn.
Yeah.
Cuchulainn, the death of Cuchulainn, and the one that you've done here, it's medieval warriors, yes? Yeah.
So I call those the black and white ones. I call them poetic silhouettes.
Yes.
So you all know Cuchulainn didn't tie himself to a tree; it was more to a rock. But at the time I painted that, it was a watercolor with pen and ink.
Yes.
And I did that when I was in Kosovo in 2000. Well, the trip to Kosovo in 2000, as you can imagine, peacekeeping.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a rough experience. So my escape was to be drawing and stuff, So I brought that home.
And it must have been quite difficult to keep the artwork intact as well, because you would have been, a soldier, and how do you keep everything intact and clean? And
yeah, well, my wife was sending me out history magazines. So when I do the painting, like watercolor would dry very quick anyway. So I put them into the magazine covers, into the sheets of the pages now, and then when I came home at the end of the 6 months, I threw them into a cupboard for years, and then
and then grabbed them again and said, "I've got a whole collection."
Yes, but the silhouettes were done more or less in the years after that,
And what was the book you were showing us just there?
This was my first book. You can see it there. It's called On Horton Ground: Poetic Silhouettes on Soldiers, History, Love and Tragedy, and it has that painting. But there's also this one on the back. Poems are in there. So they're my first poems. They're very bad.
Oh no, they're not at all. In fact, I was just going to ask you the question about that. You had, it was 2009, wasn't it, on Hurting Ground? And you mentioned there, didn't you mention Cancer Research and the Heart Foundation?
Yeah.
Wasn't that book in aid also, wasn't it a partnership that you were raising money for the Mary Keating Foundation?
The reason for the Mary Keating was my mother had breast cancer. And that's basically how she passed.
Yeah.
Her sister, my aunt, died a few months later, and she had a heart condition. You know, so any books I publish, all the money's gone to charity. You know.
My goodness, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic. You mentioned that you did a degree. Now, my husband is he's an alumnus of Maynooth.
Yeah.
And you went to Maynooth?
Yeah. So I went.
How did you find Maynooth?
Well, it's a long time ago now. Things have changed, I suppose, there. But I mean, I had just come home from Kosovo. I wasn't very well. My wife, Niamh, was worried. She knew I needed an interest to get away from the kind of frame of mind I was in.
Of course.
She liked history. I got into the history. I didn't think I'd be able to do a degree. I was scared. I went to Maynooth. I was an adult education program. I was 30, I think, hitting 31 at the time. It's 20 years ago, actually, this year, and marvelous. Like, you know, I think I matured in a lot of ways there. So I was working and I was studying at night in Maynooth.
Yes.
2007, and I came out with a master's degree at the end of it. So
yeah, your master's. So because you did your BA.
Yeah.
And it was the following year, was it, that you did your master's?
Yes.
Modern history.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah.
That was quite an experience. I mean, like yourself, I was an educating reader. I didn't do my degree until I think I started it when I was 32.
Yeah.
And I love lifelong learning. And I think I'm very happy now. I don't know about you, but I'm happy that I waited, because if I had tried to go to uni, which wouldn't have been expected of me when I was younger, but if I tried to go to uni, I think I would have probably chosen the wrong subjects to read.
Yeah.
I'm glad I waited. What about yourself? Do you feel that waiting until you were older was the right way?
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to figure it out. I still haven't figured out who I am, really, but back then I was trying to figure out who I was. But I just finished been in the Defence Forces and the Air Corps. I was doing a trade, studying for a trade, aircraft technician. At the end of that, I went to Kosovo. I should have went to Kosovo, and then I came back and did the degree in history. So I was 10 years studying, you know. So my head was fried at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I dragged mine out for 14 years, but I have to say I've used every single bit of those degrees in some way.
Yeah,
they've all come to my rescue. Some people they study degrees and they do something totally different in life, but I don't know. It's all come in very handy, particularly for the books. You know, because I'm an author myself, and you know, I have found myself going back to those books more over and over again and drawing something from them that I could use. That you never read. That's the great thing about the arts, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you so many layers.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So your first book was The Hurting Ground. Yes. And then your second book, was that The Battle of Jadotville? Yeah,
so The Battle of Jadotville, Irish soldiers in combat in the Congo, 1961. That stemmed out of my my Bachelor of Arts degree thesis. That's it there. You can download it online, a PDF of it from the South Dublin Library. So South Dublin Library is in Tallaght, where the headquarters of the South Dublin Library is, Tallaght Library. They've always been very good to me. I've great friends over there, although some of them have moved on, and one guy in particular, Kieran Swords, has passed away. But they were great people, and he encouraged me. So he published this for me in 2006, and then the next book was result of the master's degree. So they were my theses, and then when I had submitted them and got my qualification, I went and did more research and expanded on the thing, you know. So that book came out in 2006, and it came out the same kind of week or so at Declan Power's The Siege of Jadotville, which is the one the movie was based on.
Yeah.
I think it's a Netflix movie. maybe it's not.
That's right. I only saw it recently. I hadn't realized that they'd gone ahead and made it. I heard that it was going to be made. And in fact, the person who told me, I don't know if you can see his picture there, that's myself and Sil Doyne.
I know Sil very well, yeah.
Yeah, and he came in. I actually had a Victorian tea rooms in a cemetery in Dublin, and he came in one day. It was in connection with, I think it was one of the soldiers had passed. Yeah. And he came in and he was chatting away to me about it. And he's the one, he'd been he'd been interviewed, and they were looking for more information, of course, on the movie. So you actually published your book ahead of all this. This is 10 years earlier, right? So
yes.
You were, yes.
So Declan Power and myself, I think, were the only two people writing in Ireland to a research thing, you know. So it was a long time before the movie. So what's a long time ago now? 15 or 16 years ago. So there was very little access to information back then, you know.
Absolutely. So this was was this a totally different experience for you, because you're documenting something that really happened?
Yes.
And regardless of your own career, it's still something. When you're writing, at least I noticed this because I wrote a memoir that was a true story. You feel obligated, don't you, to get it right?
Yes, especially because it's about somebody else, and you want to get it right because it's like you're being a witness to something that you didn't witness.
Yes.
You know, you're documenting this thing. It's the same with the oral history program that I've been running with the military archives for the last 5 or 6 years. You're trying to tell the stories of these people, and you want to get it correct, or as you know, I mean, you want to really not make too many mistakes. You all make mistakes, but you want to get it as accurate as possible. But it's a tremendous experience, and I'm privileged to be able to do these things, you know, and to meet those people. And they're falling away big time at the moment, but it's great.
Yes, they are. They are. So I mean, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have got the and as you said, the oral history program. I saw that you were interviewing some very high profile figures in the last couple of months, and to know that that's going to be in the archive, you know, that is really, it's yours and your name is on it, and you've contributed in that way. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, your main poetry collections that you're known for, you've got a 2016 and 2019 dual book collection. I absolutely loved your 2016 book. It was, can you tell me how this came about, Peacekeeper?
Okay, so we just go back to the oral history for you. We go on anyway, Miriam. Just say that I'm not the person involved in that project.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Of them, you know, but the Peacekeeper, the poetry in the Peacekeeper magazine, that's more or less based on, the Peacekeeper collection, not the magazine.
This one here.
Yeah, so there's an awful lot of, I'm trying to, in that collection, I'm trying to speak of my own experiences, and also the experiences of Irish soldiers who over the last 50 odd years have been serving all around the world, peacekeeping. And in Ireland, there's a kind of a gap between the understanding of the public and what the Defence Forces do. It was a learning curve for me to revisit those memories and write them down. And I start sending them off to magazines and to online magazines, and they were being published. And there was an interest in it because it was something very new. An Irish soldier writing poetry. And later, as I discovered, and we had this conversation ourselves a few years ago in Cow Square in the museum, because you're interested in Francis Ledwidge.
Yeah, I did my master's thesis on defending him as a World War I war poet. That's when I first met you at the barracks there at Kew Square.
So I'm not a war poet.
No.
Ireland wars, but I mean it's in the same vein. I'm a peacekeeper poet, if you like. I'm writing about the experience in the two collections, but also trying to talk about why we were in those places and things that happened, and be a witness, if you like.
Yes.
So I don't class myself anywhere in the same vein as Francis Ledwidge, you know, Tom Kettle, or any of the other World War I poets. But it turns out that I'm probably the first Irish soldier poet to publish a collection.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's 100, you know. And I've actually graves, and I've been to the Somme and to Flanders a number of times, to Gallipoli, And I always think of these people when I go there. And in the Rules of Engagement collection, I've actually written about those experiences of walking in their footprints, you know.
So Rules of Engagement, the 2019 collection. Can you tell me a little bit, how do they differ? How do these two collections differ?
Okay, so in 2016 was the centenary of the 1916 Rising. Okay, so up until that period, those poems are more of my experience and some of the experiences I knew of looking back through the history, because I was studying the history. 2019, that collection came out, and that's based on my own experience, my family's experience, my family's military and, you know, family history, talking about my father, he was in the military, and then people I'd met since through the oral history program.
Yes.
I'm trying to tell that story of the Defence Forces experience, plus also my own family experience in the military. But because I've been writing poetry, I've always looked at the world in a kind of in a different way. I don't look at the roads when I'm walking. I look up, I listen, and I absorb everything around me. And I learned on that collection that I had observed an awful lot and absorbed an awful lot of experience, my own experience and other people's experience. So I tried to incorporate that into it, you know. And I was very lucky that Dora Press published my collections. They're a great crowd down there.
Both collections are through Dora Press, and also didn't the libraries, the South Dublin libraries, publish a second book?
Yes, that Allegiance is Compromised. So that was in 2011. That was a history book.
Yes,
that was on the result of the MA thesis, which I expanded on further research. So Jodasville and Allegiance is Compromised were South Dublin libraries, and these are Dora Press. So the Allegiance is Compromised tells it's an examination of, if you like, of, it's called Allegiance is Compromised, ex-British soldiers in the Irish Army, 1913 to 24. There is there.
Yes. Yes.
So it's telling the Irish, I'm trying to tell the story of the overall story of our guys that come home from the Great War.
Yes.
After the Great War and joined the Free State Army, but they also joined the IRA. They were involved in the revolution. You know, so I felt that story hadn't been really explored.
It hadn't been told, no. And this is what I found. I was looking for people when I was doing my MA who had written exactly on this subject, and it hadn't happened yet. So I'm looking for this in 2010. You know, you were going to publish a couple of years later, you know, which was great. But that's exactly, there were so many gaps, and obviously you identified those gaps as well, and you've now written in those, which is it is phenomenal, and I can't begin to tell people how important that is, because we had over 70 years a very if you like, schizophrenic attitude and relationship with literature from front lines, from anyone who had been a soldier, from anyone who had come from a literary background and was struggling to write. There would have been many holes in our knowledge. People didn't want to say too many things. And only now have we reached a point where we can look back and actually re-examine those stories and actually start to feel a little bit more relaxed about telling their stories. And as you said, to tell those stories with truth and honesty. It's very important, but so few people were doing it. And it's great to see you doing it.
Sorry if I go on. There has been Irish soldiers, like there was people who served in the emergency, say, in the Irish Army in World War II. And after the service, they wrote poems from that period. Like Gerald Daw brought out a collection a number of years ago.
Gerald Daw, that's right.
Irish war poetry, you know.
It was just difficult. What I was focused on was World War I, and that was where we had very little to say. Lots of other people had things to say about us, but it's great to see that you went there, both for 1916 and also for World War I and the Battle of the Somme. I'm sure as you were doing your research, people started to realize this man from Tala, he's making progress here. This soldier is making progress here. You were given the 2015 Tala Person of the Year award.
Well, I that was one category of the overall award, so I won it on the art category, you know.
That
So
must have
that
been
was
very nice from your own hometown to get selected.
recognition, like, you know,
Yeah.
like South Dublin and Tallaght especially has an awful, like Catherine Tynan lived in Tallaght, like, you know, there was
Catherine
lots of
Tynan. Yeah.
literary, she was from Clondalkin, but she had a place in Tallaght. There's a lot of literary history in Tallaght and South Dublin.
Yes.
Long before me, going back generations, you know, so I'm just one of the number of people who are living here now who were doing similar things.
But you've also been you've been awarded in many categories. So I can also pick out quite a few: the Patrick Kavanagh International Poetry Prize, the Jonathan Swift Creative Writer Awards. I mean, it's great when you start getting awards like that. That all really kicked off in 2011 for you, didn't it?
Um,
The awards
well,
started coming through then, wasn't it? Around about
yeah,
that time.
2011, which is 10 years ago now. You know, see the Peacekeeper collection that's there. So
Yes.
the nucleus or the guts of the poems that are in that formed the submission to the Patrick Kavanagh Award in 2011.
Okay. So that's the connection there. What about the Paul Tissander diploma? Can you tell me what that is exactly? It sounds as though it's French.
It is, yeah. So that was given me to the Irish Aviation. I can't remember the name of the
Federation Aeronautique International.
Yeah, so I was nominated for that award. That's a European Aviation Award, and there's all different kind of categories in that. So there's people who do sports flying and military. There's all different categories. So there's one for heritage, trying to keep the history of aviation afloat. So I'm the curator of the Irish Air Corps Military Aviation Museum. So this crowd, I can't remember the name of the group, who they submitted my name for that award for the work I've been doing on the aviation way back then. I think that was 2010 as well.
2010, yes. But that then, was that strictly military aviation, or did it take in civil as well?
Mostly civil, but it's a European wide thing, and it goes back 100 years. Paul Tissander was a French, like, as a pioneer of aviation 100 years ago, 110 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
So, going on for many years, and I was just looking for all the countries in Europe, and my name was submitted for that, for all the work I've been doing. Like, I didn't know at the time. Next of all, my name was taken out of a hat, and the award was in Serbia, but I couldn't go to Serbia at the time. There was an award ceremony in Baldonnel where I work, and it was given to me then in conjunction with the general of the Air Corps at the time.
So, very good. Yeah. And how long has the museum been in existence now?
Well, it's 20 years this year since we started establishing. So it's not a full-blown museum like the National Museum, I think that, but we have a hangar full of aircraft and vintage artifacts, documents and stuff like that, you know. And it's closed at the moment because of the lockdown.
Of course, yeah, of course. So, just moving on a little bit now to other types of writing. Do you see yourself staying in the poetry line, or do you see yourself perhaps going into any other form of writing?
Well, listen, I'll go where it takes me, you know, but I've written, I don't just write the soldier poetry or the war poetry. I have written and published other poetry as well. Also short stories. I've had short stories published. I'll stay in that vein.
And film scripts.
Well,
you did a course, didn't you? With the...
years ago, but my son, Mikey, my daughter and my son, Emily and Mikey, that's the road they're going down. Like, my son Mikey just finished
screenwriting.
But he's a filmmaker, but he's actually going to do a master's in screenwriting now. And my daughter's doing a degree as well in talent in the same vein. It's more graphic sort of thing. I can't remember the name of it, but so I won't follow that thing because that's theirs now. You know?
Because yes, this can happen in families, can't it? Like, I was a professional singer and writer, but because my mother was a painter, and I could paint, but I didn't want to go there because that was her thing. You know, I think it's respect.
It is, yeah, but young people, I remember being their age, you want to find your own path, and That's their
Exactly.
yeah.
That's their path. So, and you must have very patient wife and family, you know, with all the things that you've done.
Well, listen, my wife Neve is brilliant, and I would not be doing any of the stuff that I do now without her. And that's the truth, because she
Yeah.
set me down. She allowed me to do these things, studying, even though you're working in Ireland costs money, but it did for me, and she helped me.
Doing an
My
interview on
wife,
Mother's Day.
and I was a
Very
birthday
good.
employed.
Very
She,
good one. What about the tours? You lecture and you tour. You know, when this is pre-pandemic, I know, but it is something that you are quite used to now, isn't it? You go around schools, you go to conferences.
yeah, I've done some seminars and military history tours of Dublin and other locations, and some locations abroad in France and Belgium. I've done all that kind of stuff, you know. But it's introducing people to Irish military political history, I suppose, some soldiers as well, like, you know. So I've done all that, and then going out to schools over the years. But all that's kind of stopped now, you know.
All of it stopped. Oh, look, tell us about it.
Tour.
It is difficult when that happens. Could I trouble you to read some of your poetry for me?
Yeah, sure. Did you have any in mind?
I thought Gallipoli was lovely. I don't know if you still have that to hand there. You read a selection of poetry at the Fingal poetry festival there online. It was beautiful, absolutely stunningly beautiful. But I just thought some of your favorites, maybe one from Peacekeepers and one from Rules of Engagement.
Okay, so Gallipoli is in Rules of Engagement.
Yeah.
Page 16 there. So Gallipoli, growing up, I've been reading about Irish soldiers in the First World War, and I love the story of Gallipoli. It's so far away and it has so much ancient historical and poetic aspects to it, you know. But Francis Ledwidge.
Yes, Gallipoli. Yeah.
So a friend of mine, Tony Rowe, who this collection is dedicated to, he passed away a couple of years ago. He initially brought me there in 2011, this year again, 10 years ago. And it was a great experience, very humbling to be standing out on the cemeteries of these Irish soldiers and English and other nationalities, and standing in the footprint of history. And this is how this poem came around. So I'll just read it now, okay? It's Gallipoli for Tony Rowe after a visit to the battlefields, 2011. Today I stood above the Aegean Sea, listening for echoes I could not hear. The silent tempo of the ground resonates still on unnatural landscapes. The zigzag lines where dead men toil, dug deep into blood-smeared soil, buried now with their bones, on beaches and gullies where once they fought the Turk, stormed the shores and hills as if thrown against the wind by Agamemnon himself. The silence bade me look towards Troy, across the straits from Hellas. I still could hear no voice, nor thunder in the sky, except the launching waves pushing ancient pebbles up the beach to rest, where once they drowned the hearts of men. Then, behind me, I could feel it, the noise of peace and echoes of war in 1,000 monuments to the dead, stretched out in marching order. And there, watching me, my shadow took on the spectre of a ghost and spoke. Like Hector, I was the defender, brave and virtuous, but of Irish stock. I am the soldier my country forsook. And in response I said, I have come at last to pay my respects. I have come to take you home. So that's just remembering that those people who fought in the war were forgotten about for a long, long time.
Oh my goodness, that was marvelous. Absolutely wonderful. And it just took you straight to the place. It's wonderful. Do you have another one for us there, Michael?
I can read you one from Peacekeeper. I'm just trying to think of the best one. There's one, maybe Grapes of Wrath or Deliverance 26. Okay, so Deliverance was one of the first poems from this collection that I had published, and it was actually part of the submission to the Patrick Kavanagh. And basically, in Lebanon, I guess it's 26 years since I was forced in Lebanon. Is it 26 years? Yeah, 27 years nearly. And in the Irish Battalion area, there was an orphanage, and anytime there was shooting or shelling going on, this orphanage, which had all these orphans in it, of course, would be hit by bullets or rockets or some kind of thing. And now, and the Irish Battalion troops would give money to the orphanage and bring the children into our shelters when it was very bad. But we were always worried about these children and the people that manned the orphanage. So it's called Deliverance. In the orphanage, a child cowers from cursing men outside. She wants to climb back into her dead mother's womb and hide inside its warm, soft, unedged safety, where no explanation is needed, or reason to hide under splintered staircases, or run the gauntlet to basement bomb shelters, existing minute to minute with strangers until the dawn arrives with her deliverance and she refuses to be born.
Oh, that is superb. That is superb. Are you preparing anything at the moment, Michael? Are you preparing any fresh work for publication?
Well, I am trying to work on a new collection of poems, you know. I'm not going to read any of them to you, but I'm writing stuff. Actually,
yeah, sure.
Stuff happens to me. I'm walking along and I hear something. Like, I have to get out into nature to be walking in the park or through the trees or outside the house for something to happen. I'll write it down and it leads onto something. Like, you know, even this morning, like, I was writing a poem while I was going along in the rain. I could hear tap, tap, tap walking along the bushes, and I'm looking over and there's water coming off a branch hitting a sweet wrapper, and that led onto something. You know?
Yeah. And as you say, it's very important to look up, isn't it? It's very important to actually take in your entire surroundings and the context and just let your creativity. Yeah.
But sometimes like everybody's suffering, and I go through waves and troughs, and like there's a weight on my shoulder sometimes, but if I can get outside and look around, and birds, especially birds and trees, would be big themes in my writing. Like, you know, I love that kind of stuff, you know. That's
where you connect with the traditional themes of poetry in this country, isn't it? With the pastoral side too.
That's another Ledwidge thing. There were poems in there about visiting Ledwidge, his grave, and then being in Gallipoli, because he wrote about the lark, and you know,
yeah,
what I mean,
yes, yeah, the blackbird, absolutely. I
couldn't figure that out years ago, but now I understand exactly what he was.
Exactly the same situation for me too. I was wondering, what was this reliance on this imagery? And you have to know, you have to go into the history, you have to be able to see what the symbolism meant. But equally, it takes on fresh symbolism for you, doesn't it? When you find yourself in situations that may be shades similar to what he was in, you suddenly say, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I often wonder what would have been like if he'd have lived, you know. What we would have got. And Tom Kettle and the other poets, like, you know, amazing. And that's how we look at the world now and look at history. It's through poets as well, like, because they bring their experiences to life. And I hope that's what I'm doing, bringing my experience.
Yeah, no, you are, absolutely you are. And as I say, you certainly have made your mark now. And it's amazing what's happened since 2016, isn't it? A lot of things have accelerated. And a lot of people are looking to poets like yourself now to if you like, direct them.
Yeah, I think poetry has kind of fallen by the wayside in Ireland, and maybe it'll really have a resurgence. I hope so. You know, and Ireland's the world's gone through a kind of a paradigm shift at the moment, and
yes,
I don't know if it's going to be a new normal or a better normal or a worse normal, but the world is in such a mess, you know.
Yeah, and I think people they're turning to poetry and songs, and of course, as you know as well, songs of the fields. You know, so they used the term song for poetry back in the early 1900s. You know, the two words were interchangeable, poetry and song. And so
Yes.
we're kind of back there again, where songs and poetry, I think, are going to be far more popular now. People are turning to poetry in this pandemic,
Well,
and we've seen it with.
Technology is a wonderful thing, but I think you lose the emotional touch or contact with humanity through it in a lot of ways. And I think we're starting to rediscover. Hopefully, we're going to rediscover humanity and
through our literature,
one
through
way
our poetry. Yeah, I agree with you.
That's such an ancient thing.
It's such an ancient thing. Yes, absolutely it is. Michael, I'm delighted to have had you on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And I hope you'll come back on the show again when you've got some more work out there published.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks,
Lovely.
Miriam.
Great talking to you.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.